yet. Okay, I apologize, no video yet. I'm just trying to work out something with Chrome. I should have tested this earlier. I apologize again, everyone. But hopefully we'll get everything working in a second. Okay, looks like we got Neil is watching. Say hello, Neil. Everyone watching, you can make comments in the chat window on YouTube in the bottom right corner underneath the video, or the side of the video, depending on your layout. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's see. I apologize again. It's I'm installing Minicam to get this working. Because I don't have any other way to make it work. Anyone from the Peanut Gallery, if you have ideas on how to make this work a little bit smoother, I would love to have some comments. Every time I try to make, YouTube, let me stream a screen, it just crashes, which sort of makes me upset. Okay, Minicam is almost installed. Once that's installed, we should be rolling. All right, well, let's start this video while we're waiting for Minicam to install, while we talk about responsive HTML and what this means. Responsive HTML in a nutshell is the idea that instead of switching to a completely different document on smaller screen sizes, you stick with the same basic HTML document, and you're letting CSS change the layout to better fit the design. Okay, let's take a look here. Okay. All right. Let's see here. I just attempted to turn on my webcam. Is it doing anything? It's doing nothing. Okay, I apologize. Let's take a look here. There we go. Whoa, Doctor Who time. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, we got it working. We have it working. In theory. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Okay, so there we go. For some reason, it is mirrored. That is lovely. Why? I don't know. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. How do I rotate this? There we go. There we go. Are you seeing the video now? Okay, good. We have the video working. All right. So as I was saying, the idea of HTML and CSS is the idea of responsive is you're using style sheets, CSS, to change how the HTML is laying out. Let me give you a good example here. This here is the base code for my framework, which I call Shipwright. Shipwright is something I have developed over the course of the last year while working at award-winning studio Steadfast Creative. I will post the URL on here just so you all see it. All right. Well, for some reason, all right. Well, I'll post it later on the show description then. But Shipwright is on GitHub. It is a fully compatible HTML, CSS. Hello. I fixed that. I apologize for the comedy of errors. This is my first time. Be gentle. Yeah, I know. Yeah, Neil just said the video was mirrored. Yeah, I know. Okay, video should be fixed now. So the idea of Shipwright is, again, it's let me increase the quality a little bit. Okay, so the quality should be increased on the video as well in a moment. So Shipwright is designed to be fully responsive out the gate. Let me go ahead and use the live preview option here so you can see. So this is the basic window of Shipwright. Basically, we have a full-sized header with a menu with a logo in the middle, and here is the box structure. Now, when I say responsive, the idea is as my screen sizes down, elements either resize or stack themselves to better format the screen. So as you can see here, we have the boxes, resizing themselves, etc., etc. Actually, let me just do something right here. Oh yeah, we see the items resizing themselves until we have it going to a single stack for phones, because on phones, a single stack works best for reading content. So this is the idea of responsive, where everything sizes correctly and restacks itself to be readable on all screens. Now, the idea with responsive is you have to keep in mind when coding that you don't have to necessarily put in hard widths. At work, we recently had someone come in to try to help with development. Long story short, not everything went great, but at the same time, sort of inspired me to do this video series. So not all things are bad. So let's see here. I'm just writing some code here. I'm going to make this code larger just so people can read it. Let's see here. View. Yeah, increase font size. Okay, so here we go. The code should be a lot readable now. So here we have a basic HTML document. The first part of making sure your HTML is responsive is you have to make sure you have a meta tag here called a viewport tag. Basically, what this is doing is telling the device, be it a web window or a phone, what the width of the document is. So, for instance, this is telling the device that the width of the document is the width of the device. Thus, this is how you do responsive coding. Now, Now, there's some other stuff here, but we won't cover that tonight. We're going to talk specifically more about the base concepts of responsive and about widths. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. 1 second. Let's see here. I was supposed to have some other people pop in. Okay. So let's talk about width. So we had this guy, nice guy. He was a really nice guy, but he had a problem. He didn't understand why the code he was writing wasn't responsive. He kept on saying, "Well, it looked good on my screen," and that's an excuse we always hate. So let me give you an example of basically what he was doing. Of course, he wasn't writing an inline; he was using classes and stuff like that. But just for the sake of an example. For the sake of example, I am going to do it this way. So we'll do it that way. Hit the live preview. Okay, I have to save the document first. Now let me do it. So basically, what this is a fixed width object, because we declared our width right here, width 700 pixels. So when and the thing to keep in mind is with responsive, there's a couple of sizes you have to keep in mind when you're talking responsive. The first size you have to keep in mind is base width, and then you have to keep in mind tablet width, and finally phone width. So let's specifically talk about this here, because here we have an object with a base with a width of 700 pixels. The object itself has a width of 700 pixels. So what that means is if you have a screen smaller than 700 pixels, it's not responsive. You have this little scroll bar at the bottom here. Hello, I'm not responsive. And this is what he was doing. And you might be saying to yourself, well, gee, if a design has an object with a set width, how am I going to make it that set width, but all at the same time make it responsive? Well, let me tell you how. There is a command in CSS, which is great, called max width. Now, with max width, what we're saying is this object can be a maximum of 700 pixels wide, but if we go smaller, it'll default to 100 pixels wide. So that way, this object is now responsive because now it's 100% wide. 100% to its container, that is. And the container is the document itself, and as the document shrinks, it's not trying to flow outside the container. So with just a very simple 4 extra characters, something that was non-responsive suddenly magically becomes responsive. Any questions so far from the peanut gallery? Again, you can make any comments or questions in the chat window on the right side. Okay, then I'm going to move on. So that's how max width works. So let's talk about base width. Now, base width is another element of design. It's not even an element of HTML and CSS. So here we go back to shipwright. Let me specifically show you one of the elements I have in shipwright, which is in the main CSS file. We have base width. So the base width of my test shipwright document is 1180. Now, lots of people are going, what's base width? Base width is basically the width of the document that you're working off of. Like if you work in a design agency, you get some PSDs from a designer who probably designs in a grid system. Like there's several popular grid systems, like there's the 1170 grid, 960 grid, et cetera, and these are grid systems designed for rapid deployment based off of grid items. Shipwright is base width agnostic. if we look at the document, if we look at the index document I created here, we have a nice base, 1180s are base width here. But let's say I go to my CSS file and start messing around in a little bit. Okay, so 1180. So let's say I got a PSD that's 1,000 pixels wide. Boom. My base width is now 1,000 pixels. Now, what this means is basically that base width is something that a designer presets based off of what they are expecting the initial page load to be. A designer wants the content to only go this wide, not any wider. Content only goes this wide, not any wider. And this was the decision they made based off of their own design expertise and ability, et cetera, et cetera. So, it bugged me to death. There we go. There we go. So that's what base width is. And in responsive development, again, as you see here, I set my base width with max width. And the reason why I do that is once the screen goes smaller than 1,000 pixels, everything's going to go back to percentages, 100% of the screen. And, see down here, we don't have that nasty little Mr. Scroll bar down here. So that's the whole idea of the strength of using a base width. We sort of stop that from happening, which saves a lot of effort in coding, because if you code with lots of widths and no max widths, then all of a sudden you're going to have to write a lot more breakpoints, which we'll get into in a second. All right. Any questions at all so far? I mean, this is going great, but I'd love to hear some questions or feedback, because I can go a mile a minute here, but at the same time, I know that I might be leaving some people in the dust here. Okay, let's move on then. So with talking about base widths and max widths and etc., let's talk about percentages. So as you can see in Shipwright, you see lots of these boxes here that box 1 2, box 1 2, which basically means it's 1/2, or box 1/3, or etc. Well, the reason why these still conform to their percentages on those intermediary screens is because these are sized used with percentages, not hard widths. Again, let me show you here my messy math here. I have widths with percentages here for all my box classes, which handles the responsiveness, which works really well, by the way. Rather lovely, honestly. So this is already in place for a good reason, like I said, because when you are writing HTML and CSS and you want to be responsive, you should use percentages. What I usually do is I define a base width for the base container, and then all the inner containers I set with percentages. That way, when people get on the smaller screens, they have a consistent behavior and a consistent experience. Something you can't get if back to our original example, you are using solid hard widths, because an iPhone 5 is only 320 design pixels wide. I'm going to explain what design pixels mean in a minute, but it's only about 320 design pixels wide, and you have a width of 700. Of course, you're going to have content overflowing off the edge, and that's only natural. And like I said, it only takes those 4 characters to make something responsive, and I think that's rather lovely. So that's what we have to talk about right here. So I was mentioning I was mentioning design pixels versus real pixels. A good example of this is the iPhone 5, because the iPhone 5, design wise, is 320 pixels wide. It has 640 physical pixels across, but it's only 320 design pixels wide. A physical pixel is a dot on a screen that could be red, green, blue, or any combination therein of those 3 colors. But, and this is important, around the time that the iPhone 4 came out, pixel density sort of became a big sort of arms race in the smartphone arena, where they were talking about where the iPhone 4 was double the pixel density of its predecessor, and the way that Apple got around not having everyone reprogram their apps was they just basically told the web browser plus other parts of the OS to treat it as 320 pixels when it's actually physically 640 pixels. That's the easiest way to explain it. There's a lot more behind it, but we're not going to cover that tonight on this example. So that's how it works. That's why when I say 320 design pixels, I say design pixels, because it's not really a physical pixel. Pixel has now become a measurement, not a physical part of a screen, at least when you're talking in web design. When you're talking phones, a pixel is still when you're talking phone specs, a pixel is still a thing. When you're talking screen engineering, a pixel is still a thing. But when you're talking web design, a pixel is a unit of measurement that doesn't mean a physical pixel anymore. Any questions so far? Peanut Gallery. I see 4 people watching. Okay, let's move on then. So that's what a physical pixel is, and like I said, the thing to keep in mind when writing is max width to define your base width, and percentages define all objects therein inside. So let's say we have a max width of 700 pixels here. Let's say I want to have an object be only about 30% as wide inside. So I'm writing some dirty CSS here. Let's say I want to have another object on the other side that's also 30 pixels wide. And that's what float left and right means. Basically, float left says I'm forcing you to go immediately to the left despite what any sort of text alignment is being called in your container. And float right's doing the same thing. So as you can see in our document here, we now have 2 objects that are on the left and on the right that are 30% wide. So as you can see here, as we size down past the 700 pixels, they are still staying in their percentage width, which is rather lovely. Okay, and again, if we make the max width a little bit wider, the percentages are still being honored, which again is super duper lovely. Um, this makes it a lot easier to write code. This makes it a lot easier to make sure an object truly is responsive. Because again, if you use hard widths, you're going to have to rewrite your code a lot more often. But if you use max widths and percentages, you'll find that like 80% of your responsive work is done for you out the gate, which again, super lovely, super nice. So that's how that works. Now, you might have seen on smaller screens the objects actually stack on themselves. That's where we use a little piece of magic that's called a media query, which in a CSS document looks a little like this. Now, what a media query does is it says, once you reach these conditions, this is actually a little bit of a logic layer here, start using this code. And because CSS is cascading, code closer to the bottom, code that's on the bottom pertaining to certain objects takes precedence over code that's above it. So that's why we use media queries, because what we're saying here is if the screen is only this wide, start doing stuff that I want you to do. So let me just steal this media query here and let me just put it in the head here. Again, this is not best practices here. This is just an example. So here we're writing a media query where we're going to say, oops, wrong document. We're going to say wrong document. Okay, let's not do that there. Let's do that here. So here we have a media query where we're going to say that what we're going to do is we're going to say that when the div inside of a div, so it's going to be a width of 100% with no float. When the screen is, let's say, 500 pixels or less. So what this will do is when we're sizing down, when we get down to 500 pixels or less, versus these, instead of being 33%, 33%, are going to stack on top of each other right about what? Oh, come on. That was good code. What are you doing to me? Okay, let me give this a class. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay, this is a good lesson that whenever you have code that's inline, it's always going to take precedence over code that is being declared in the header or a style sheet. That's a rookie mistake on my part. I apologize for that. So what I'm going to do is rectify that right now. Some dirty CSS. Okay, so what we did here is exactly what I said. So let's again make it 500. So we have one on the left and one on the right, and let's see here. We have one on the left, one on the right. Once we get smaller than 500, boom, they stack on top of each other. And the reason why you want to do this, again, is readability. On smaller phone screens, we don't want to have 5 columns across. We want to treat objects as singular block objects stacking on top of each other for the best readability experience on the phone. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this. I promise the next one will be a little bit more structured. I had fun doing this. So next time we'll talk a little bit more about responsive design. I'll show a little bit more about Shipwright, my HTML and CSS framework. In fact, let me just post the Shipwright, the URL right here on the post here. That's where you can grab Shipwright. It is on GitHub. It is completely, totally free and ready for people to grab. There's no instruction manual for it yet or documentation, but I am readily available. Just contact me. I will walk you through how Shipwright works and everything it does. So I just want to say good night. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all had as much fun doing this as I had, doing this. All right, and good night.